Hi, I'm Yui Xu.
And I'm Julie Kraftchick.
We're active daters turned dating sociologists.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to the Dateable podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to post-Thanksgiving madness here at Dateable. How full are you, Julie?
Still full. I feel like I was gone forever, even though it was a week. I was back in Boston for the holidays.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I think like when you're not in your own bed, it does feel like a bit, right? But it was nice. How was your holidays?
It was very non-eventful. I went to a brunch with my parents on Thanksgiving, but at brunch, we went to brunch at 10:45 a.m., by the way. Okay, on Thanksgiving Day. The people that sat next to us were on a first date.
On Thanksgiving?
Isn't that awkward?
I mean, I guess like if you're home for the holiday, I mean, you have nothing to do,
I heard their whole story. They're coworkers exploring a possible romantic connection. And the guy was so awkward. He gave her his whole STI results.
What?
Like he's like, I get tested for chlamydia on a quarterly basis. And she's like, why? Why do you need to do that?
That's awkward. I could just picture this Thanksgiving, like Yue's parents are there trying to have like a nice meal.
Yes.
And then Yue's ear is like in the conversation of the people next to them.
Well, he was so loud. My dad's like, what's chlamydia?
Oh,
like,
my
boy.
God.
Oh boy. Ask Google, Dad.
Oh my God. Okay, your whole family was eavesdropping because they were that much. That's crazy.
Well, they were facing towards us, and he was so awkward and loud. And I just like I couldn't believe that they were spending their first date as coworkers, exploring a possible romantic connection on Thanksgiving morning.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I was thinking like maybe they'd gone home, but they probably were just like didn't go back home. Like they stayed behind. But still, I don't know. I feel like even like brunch, it's just a very interesting first date. The whole thing
very
about
interesting.
It. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and he kept saying like, let's get whatever you want because I'm paying. But I'm paying, by the way.
That's weird.
I'm paying you.
I'm so intrigued by them. I want to find out more. I think like the best pastime is just listening to first dates because you can tell.
Oh, it's the best.
It's always so awkward. It never feels like the right dynamic of just people that are comfortable with each other ever.
I love it. Yeah, I know. Do you ever talk about chlamydia on a first date?
Nope. And that definitely did not come up at my Thanksgiving table. That's for sure.
Like, bro, we're trying to eat some turkey. Leave the chlamydia conversation off the table, please.
I love it. Yeah. No, my Thanksgiving was definitely a very busy household. Like we had my brother, sister-in-law, and niece. My niece. I'll give a shout out to my sister-in-law because I know she listens to every Dateable episode. She's such a good fan.
Does she still?
Oh yeah,
she has time.
She loves it. She goes for a walk. Listen, she's our number one. But my niece is just so cute. I love her so much, and she is such a performer. And maybe one day she'll be a future Dateable host.
Oh yes, take it
as
over
we
for
pass
us.
The legacy. I mean, by the time if that was to happen, we'd probably be pretty freaking old by then. So
I hope we're not like talking about ghosting. We're like 80.
There'll be whole new words by then. But
yeah, they died.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was nice to be back. It was really freaking cold in Boston. I realized like how much of a wimp I am now. I just forgot. A few weeks ago, I was like, I don't get cuffing season. Now I'm like, I kind of get it a little.
Yeah, it's really freaking cold.
I don't get it in many levels, as we talked about, but I get the part of maybe not like going out as much. But I don't know. It's kind of fun too to just like bundle up. But maybe not if you were doing it all the time. Maybe for me.
Yeah, you would get a little sick of it and you just want to stay home and cuddle. But there are other things you can cuddle other than like a stranger.
Heated blanket. That sounds nice.
Or how about a weighted napper?
Oh my God.
Therapy?
Yes. Oh my God. I love that thing so much.
It's great.
Obsessed.
It is one of our sponsors. We got to give a shout out to them. Therapy. They do these weighted hand crocheted blankets that they call nappers. They're just like little blankets basically, but you like bundle yourself up in them. And my friend May, May, Julie, she's such a big napper. I call her Panda all the time. She knows how to nap. And she came over to my house the other day. She's like, can I take a nap? And she saw the napper. She's like, what's this? And she just put herself into it. Like she just swaddled herself. And I was like, wow. you know exactly what to do with that. That's that's how you do that. That's what they call a napper. So she's such a natural, but that thing is
Oh my
so
God.
great.
Oh my God. So great. Yeah, it was nice that we were able to do one night in Boston, just my partner and I. So we kind of got like a date night. We went to this indoor mini golf that was so high tech. They basically calculated all your scores through the ball, and
Whoa.
like everything was done automated. So you couldn't cheat. And
Whoa.
yeah, and it was really cool. And I won twice. So I was happy.
Of course you did.
No, I don't always. I usually don't.
I do appreciate a partner who's uber competitive when it comes to that stuff. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, as long as you're competitive there and not in other ways, you know?
Right. Yes. Like at your job.
Or just like in your relationship. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I took out the trash on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Leave it to the mini golf courts.
Yeah. You love mini golf.
It's a great date. You know, we've talked about this before in the podcast. I don't think it's a good date for like date 1 through 3 because it's just hard to talk to people.
Yeah.
But once you've like established some rapport, it's super fun.
It is fun. And you get to spend a good amount of time there. Like you don't run out of things to do.
Yeah, totally.
Which is nice. I know that before we got on, I was like, Julie, I have something to discuss with you. And you're like, I have something to discuss with you.
I do.
Do you want to go first?
I feel like you ignored my text on this one. And I'm like, I'm going to bring it up here.
What? I did?
I had a very important question for you and you passed right over
you
it.
Did? Are you sure?
I mean, you're going to, like, it's not that important. But, okay. Have you seen the documentary on Netflix, Twin Flames? Holy shit.
I did not get this. No, I did not get this text message because that's the podcast I listen to.
The cult one.
The cult.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know you were listening to the podcast. I didn't even know it was a podcast.
Remember, I texted you because my friend Kate was like, you got to listen to this thing. It was about this girl in San Francisco. And I was like, oh, is this someone we know? Do you remember that?
Yes. Okay. So for anyone that has not seen it, it is wild. So it's on Netflix right now. And it's basically a married couple that's trying to help people find their twin flame, which is like the spiritual soulmate that's like your other half. But there's like a whole thing about twin flames.
Yes.
Like they weren't the one that invented it. And at first I was like, oh, like this isn't that far off from like some of the stuff we do. Like in the sense there's a group discussing, everyone's like pumped up. I was like, oh my God, this like seems like kind of like some of our like calls we've done. And then it takes some turns. And I was like, okay, this is not what we do at all. I was like, holy shit, it takes some turns. I mean, I think the girl that maybe you're talking about from SF, she had like, okay, so they basically would tell you like, this is your twin flame. Like we know who it is. They told her to pursue some guy that was clearly not into her.
Not into her
to the
at
point
all.
that she got a restraining order and ended up in jail for a month. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, because she was so convinced, like, this is your person. And if he's resisting, it just means he hasn't seen you as his twin flame yet. He doesn't know yet.
I thought I couldn't get worse than that. And then
no.
It gets way worse. The whole thing is like they can guarantee. I mean, that's like clearly something we would never say in 1,000 years. Like we can guarantee that you find your twin flame. Like who says that?
Yes.
So they were forcing people essentially to be together to show that. And then because people weren't finding their twin flames, they changed the rules that you could only find them in the group.
Yes.
But it was all women. So they started to like assign them genders. And I was like, holy fuck. People are going through like full on like gender transformations because these two people are telling them. Of course, we're clearly like so pro trans rights, but this is very different when someone's assigning you. Like these people were like, I've never felt like a man before in my life.
It's like if they said, Yue, your twin flame is Julie.
Yeah.
And then Julie's like, I didn't know Yue was my twin flame, but I will be open to it. And then they would say, Yue, you are now the man in the relationship. And I would go and like completely transform myself.
I feel like they weren't even saying like, Julie, are you open to it? It was like, Yue is your twin flame. Like that is it. It's a fact.
That's it. But you as Julie, you're like, whoa, I thought she was my friend, but now I have to see her sexually.
And it's like, if you don't choose Yue back, you've got no one. That's your twin flame.
Yeah, you're going to die.
It's your fault. I was like, holy fuck, this thing is crazy. So, okay, I guess you've been watching it or listening to it. I got to go to the podcast now. I got to get on there.
The podcast is super. I need to watch the show too.
Oh my God.
The podcast is so engaging. And I don't know, my takeaway was people will do anything to find love.
Yeah.
And they're really, exploiting that.
I hate that though, because it like discredits like things that we do, and obviously the guests
Yes.
we have. We have an amazing guest today who's like so like I want to help people, and it really just goes to show you that you need to still have a critical mind. And if you're ever in a situation where an expert is telling you that you must do something, that is something to stay away from. No one is ever in the place to tell you like this is the only path for you or this is what you must do. Like that's too far.
Yeah, a credible person will lead a horse to water.
Yes.
A non-credible, exploitive person will force the water down the horse's throat.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the difference. And we'll never force anything
Holy
down your
shit.
throat.
I was
it's
so
wild.
exhausted. Okay, coming back from Boston, and then I had like some other work things this week, and I was just so tired, yet I could not stop watching this thing.
Okay, I'm going to have to start watching it.
I watched it
story is
twice.
just, like,
I'm not going to
so
lie.
good. You
I
did?
watched it last night and the night before.
Wow. Well, a lot of these cults, they all start with such good intentions. So when you first hear about it, you kind of think, well, I could definitely be convinced of this, right? It sounds like they're helping people, but then they go the fucking extreme.
Well, the fact they were like ostracizing people from their family too, and like telling them that they had, you know, that's clearly a sign if you're ever in a situation where they're like telling you to like not talk to people, not the, you know, help that is coming from a good place, and telling you you had like past traumas that you were unaware of. Like, who are these people? That's the thing.
Definition of a toxic relationship.
Right. That's the thing though. I was like, are these people like, are they so convinced that their way, like this spiritual way they created is accurate, or are they just in it for cult leadership power? Because it's hard for me to imagine that they actually legit believe this stuff, but you never know. You never know.
You never know.
It's still running. It's still running today.
Is it really?
60,000 people in their Facebook group. They claim none of this is true. They've put out messages saying that none of this is true. They're just helping people. Yeah. Yeah, this was my big thing. It's clearly been on my mind, but yes.
Wow. Gosh, the balls on them.
Yeah.
Look at all the evidence. Look at all the people who came forward. They're just making this shit up.
I know.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, mine's less intense, but I was equally as amused, Julie. Have you heard of these venue promotion scams through dating apps?
No.
Okay, I heard this on the radio, like an old fogey that I am, but apparently it was a trend on TikTok. This woman got stood up on a dinner date. She went to the restaurant the guy picked. The guy didn't show up. And so she came back and posted it on TikTok, how she got stood up on this date, even though he picked the restaurant, and she ended up just staying at the restaurant because she was hungry. And then other women came forward and said they had the exact same experience with the exact same restaurant.
That's fucked.
So they did a little bit digging and found this is pretty prevalent on dating apps where these restaurant venues, it's called venue promotion scams, they would create bots on dating apps to lure daters to their restaurants, stand them up so that they would then feel trapped and then eat there and patronize establishment.
Again, exploiting vulnerable people. All of this.
It's been going on for over a decade, Julie.
Wow.
This is like not a new scam, but they're just now discovering it.
That's messed
wild.
Up. That's messed
That's
up.
wild. And also, and you know, the discussion is like, if someone asks you out on a date and they pick a specific place, would that raise a red flag for you?
No, absolutely not. No.
I would actually be impressed. Like, great.
Well, clearly we can't go into everything with like a skeptical mindset, but it is good to know these things are happening. And then if things start to not feel right to you, you know, maybe there is a little more going on with all the scammers. I mean, that's my only fear with all this stuff is it like makes people just so skeptical of everything.
I know. But if they're using bots, chances are these conversations were not that great.
Probably.
Right?
That's what it comes down to. It's like you need to know yourself. No wonder dating brings all sorts of trauma. I'm going to bring it back to our episode this week.
Thank you.
So much that can come from all of this. But yeah, like we're talking about with our guest today, I'm going to bring it back with our guest today, Andre. Like he is a coach that helps people like work through their past traumas, but he's not telling people what those traumas are. Like they're going to him. Like that's the difference. And I think that's what we need to remember is like, so we're not saying like don't get help from outside people. Clearly there's so much benefit. Like there's a reason why we do this podcast to get messages every week of just like how it helps people. So I don't want to like discourage helpers out there.
Yeah, and Andre specifically helps people with their previous sexual trauma. And he discovered this gift of his at a very young age. And we were very curious, what does this line of work look like?
Yeah.
How do you work with clients one-on-one on their sexual trauma? So I'm pretty sure if you've never talked to a coach in this industry before, your mind's going to be blown by what is involved.
Like, we're not going to give the exact details, but this came through someone that Yue knew. Like, this isn't just like a random person we found on the internet. Like, you had someone share with you, like, this is someone that's greatly helped me. And we were very intrigued by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is such a great conversation. I think even like we talk about it today, it's like when we hear sexual trauma, we think of like the big T trauma, but this discussion really goes into everything, you know, from someone not wanting to date you in middle school to like your parents getting divorced. Like there's all sorts of trauma that I think I'm very hesitant to even use the word trauma, but I think it does impact us. Saying like, oh, it's not that big a deal. Like that's what's suppressing some of this stuff too.
Yep. And so we hope this conversation encourages you to, one, understand this industry a little bit better, but two, to like have the empathy for yourself to understand like maybe there are some traumas that you haven't faced or saw as trauma that now you can have a more empathetic look at it all.
Yeah, whatever it is to help you ultimately like put this stuff behind you so you can have the love life you want.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we won't go any further because we got a whole episode. But before we get into it, at Dateable Podcast, that's our Instagram, TikTok. You can find us on YouTube. Love in the time of Corona. We will change the name by end of year. I'm putting that on air, so we're forced to do it. We've had a few ideas and none of them have fully stuck, so we're kind of just still muddling around. If you have a great idea, send us an email. Tell us. We got a few ones from the Facebook group we're still exploring. So this will be changed though by end of year because we know that people want to get out of Corona. Okay. And last but not least, the only gift you can give us this holiday season is a rating and review. We are so close to our goal. We're not quite there. We're still like 200 away. But we do know there's a lot of you listening, like way more than 200 that have not left a review. So we're really hoping we can get there by end of year. And, you know, if you don't use Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can always put us a review there as well. That's another area we need to build up too. This helps us so much, as you know, because it makes us a reputable podcast that people want to come on as guests, and that all benefits you all at the end of the day, and obviously us to keep this podcast going. So it's just the circle of love and giving. So please give us a review, help us keep going. It also keeps you and I personally motivated to hear stories of how this podcast has helped you, or how you've met someone, or you're enjoying dating now, or comfortable being single, or happy being single. Like all of that makes us so happy, warms our hearts, and keeps us going. Okay, well, before we get into it with Andre, let's hear a message from our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. My healing journey has had a lot of ups and downs the last few months, and there were moments where I felt stuck. For example, I knew it would be good for me to socialize and meet new people, but something was getting in my way. Therapy helped me figure out what was holding me back so I can work for myself, not against myself. Through talking to a licensed therapist, I was able to understand my fears, especially around trust in people. My therapist validated my feelings, but also helped me figure out a plan to get back into the social scene. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/dateable today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/DATEABLE.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. It can be hard to find time to cook your everyday meals at the end of the year, especially when your calendar is jam-packed with holiday plans. And from all the holiday cooking, sometimes you just want a meal that's convenient. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service that delivers chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals straight to your door. I loved how I could skip that extra trip to the grocery store and how these fresh, never-frozen meals were ready in 2 minutes. minutes. I didn't realize how much time I was saving by not having to chop, prep, and clean. Not to mention, I was really digging this sausage and pasta dish, and my partner loved his jalapeno chicken dish because he loves spicy things. The best part too is the meals felt healthy. And normally when I'm busy, I may resort to takeout a little too often. This November, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Head to factormeals.com/dateable50 and use the code dateable50 to get 50% off. That's code dateable50 at factormeals.com/dateable50 to get 50% off.
This episode is made possible by Drizzly. You hear that? That's the sound of millions of people panicking to get last-minute gifts. Or it's a car horn. Either way, it's not you, because you're getting all your gifts this year on Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. Drizzly lets you send beer, wine, and spirits to almost anywhere in as little as 60 minutes or scheduled up to 2 weeks in advance, making it the ultimate gifting hack for the holidays. Compare prices on drinks from local stores and avoid the chaos, the lines, the traffic, and the, hey buddy, learn to drive. I'm recording an ad here. It's for Drizzly, a super convenient drink delivery app that makes gifting for the holidays effortless. Yeah, you can send drinks right to anyone's door. What's that? You wish you knew about Drizzly earlier? You're literally scrambling to find gifts as we speak? Well, I download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com right now. Must be 21 and over and not available in all locations.
Okay, let's hear it from Andre.
Sex, intimacy, and all of that comes with sex and intimacy are so important to the way we relate to others and connect with others, partners in dating. But it's also so important in the way of how we relate to ourselves and understand ourselves. So today we have a sex and intimacy and relationship coach with us, Andre Lazarus, who will be shedding some light on his work, but also we'll be talking about sexual trauma and how that plays into our views and relationships with intimacy in itself. So welcome to Dateable, Andre.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Yue and Julie. Happy to be here.
And who is Andre? He's 39 years old. He lives in Asheville, North Carolina, originally from New York, and he's in an open relationship and he is poly. First of all, can you give us kind of a brief description of your work? What do you do exactly?
Sure. So I have different facets to my work, different offerings, but ultimately what I do is I help guide individuals, whether it be single individuals, couples, thruples, or more, on how to tap into their erotic power. And in each of us, I feel there's a place where we maybe hold ourselves back or don't fully own that we are these big, powerful sexual beings in the world. And here, when I get to work with you, we get to figure out what is that piece that might be missing in your life so that you can be in your full potential.
And you, on your website, you share that you have a story, your backstory, that you experience sex differently than your friends, community, society. Can you share a little more about just you and what got you into this space?
Yeah, I love sharing this story because I get to reflect back and just be forever grateful for the people who helped me to get here, because this was not just my journey, this was theirs as well. The reason that I'm sitting in front of you today doing the work that I do is because of the intimate connections. And when I say intimacy, I mean all the facets: emotional, spiritual, physical. People in my life who encouraged me to come into this work and the experiences that I got to share with them. And I really had a lot of shame around sexuality because I realized, as I shared in my story, I see sex differently and connection differently, is that I was loving multiple people. I was desiring physical connection from not just women, men, varying different individuals, and really unsure about what that would look like in my life, because I kept running into my edges of I'm supposed to be this certain way in a relationship. I'm supposed to only be desiring a certain gender opposite to my own. And that just wasn't the case. So I really just owe it to all of the individuals along my journey who encouraged me to like go into this work, because in the intimate experiences that I was sharing with a lot of these individuals, it was more than just sex. It was more than just fun, frivolous physical connection. It was actually quite healing for them. And that was hard also at first to take in. You know, when you're in a very vulnerable space with someone and people start crying or start shouting out and saying things that you're not maybe like ready for, you're like, oh, am I doing something wrong? I didn't know how to navigate it at an earlier phase of my life. And what I was finding out through my own education of learning from these individuals was that the experiences we were sharing was much more than just sexual connection. It was therapeutic in many ways. So that's kind of why I decided to lean into this. I wouldn't have done it on my own.
At what age did you find your superpowers, per se?
I like that. I definitely emulate Batman. I have him as a tattoo on my arm. So hearing you say superpower just juiced me up. So thank you for that. It started at a very early age, but I didn't know what they were. I didn't realize that they were superpowers. So even in like my high school years is when I started receiving certain reflections about how I was showing up in connection in relationship. And when we're in our teens, like, what do we really know much about relationship outside of like the excitement and maybe like the lust? And now that I look back, I realize that there were moments where those superpowers were starting to come through, but I really found it more in my like 20s, in my college years, where again, just the people that I was sharing these connections with were reflecting back what those experiences were like for them. And for me, now that I think about it, even like reflecting in our conversation here, I don't know if I was prepared for what I do today. I don't think I was prepared for it at that time in my life. I needed to live years, another decade or more, to really fully understand what that responsibility is, to be in very vulnerable, intimate spaces with people that can bring up past or even current trauma. And now having the understanding, the wherewithal, the knowledge, but also still educating myself, learning from all the clients that I work with today.
I feel like the past, whether that trauma was like big T trauma or even like the smaller T traumas of maybe just not like being the person that was viewed sexually in some way. I think we hold all the traumas that went through our lives in the formative years, and they really play into current day. Like, how have you seen this in your own life? Like things that you dealt with in your formative years, like how did that impact your own views of sex and love and relationships?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say just my own like knowledge of what relationship is, and then also of what that trauma was. I think when we're younger, we just assume that these things happen to us, and maybe at some point down the road, whatever those like difficult or challenging emotions or feelings were would like subside, or we just like get over it. But as we become these adults, we're really just big kids, we're all still children, but we just had to grow up at some point because society said so. We now realize, oh no, there's things that don't just go away. There are things that live within us, like trauma, depending on, we're talking big T, little t, trauma is something that can be attached to us within our body. And no amount of just time and pretending that it'll go away will solve that. So I think that's one piece for me, just seeing like a younger version of myself, not really like understanding what these experiences were fully until I had more just knowledge around them. Having teachers, doing my own self-work, plant medicine journeys, all of those were like stepping stones to unravel more of what my trauma past was and still is.
I think it's important now to just pause and talk about sexual trauma in general, because everybody has varying degrees of understanding what that could entail. So through your experience and the clients you've worked with, can you give us a spectrum of what sexual trauma looks like?
Yeah.
We know the opposite end of the spectrum. We've got rape, assault. And then when you work along the spectrum? What are some other examples?
That's a tough question. I mean, because it is such a spectrum. It could be you really liking someone in middle school and sending them a note and saying, "Do you like me? Check yes or no." And they check no.
Mm.
That could affect you still today. This piece of paper and this person having their own choice of their own desire,
Mm-hmm.
sharing very honestly with you, but that right there could affect how you see yourself in relationship today.
Mm-hmm.
The insecurity around what you carry into, like, oh, I can't send another note because if I do, then someone's going to reject me. That could be a traumatic experience. So the spectrum is very wide. It doesn't have to be rape, sexual assault, domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
It can be that small t, which is just not feeling appreciated, not being told that we're good enough or pretty enough. That can lead to trauma sustaining throughout our life.
I think a lot of people, myself included, are like hesitant to use the word trauma because you don't want to like detract from the big T. But I'm 100% agree. Like I remember a middle school dance when I went up to a boy and asked him to dance and he basically was like, no. And that sat with me. And it's hard though to be like, that's the same as rape. Clearly it's not. So how do people start to, one, like accept that they had these small T traumas? Is there another name for them they can give? Or like, how do you start to own that you actually had these experiences so you can rectify them in the future?
Yeah, another great question. Well, first, thank you for sharing about that experience. You're not alone. I definitely have asked people to dance and been rejected. I've told people I liked them and wanted to like be their boyfriend and was told, no, I don't like you. And that's a hard thing, especially when we're these young, impressionable beings to receive. So how do we like understand that? How do we make sense of that all and that not stay with us in a way where we're afraid to ask the next person to dance?
Right.
And the way that I see it is, first, how much do you love yourself? What is it about you and how you're showing up in the world that is fulfilling and you feel just joyful in the way that you're waking up and bringing your energy to people? Because that's where I feel like it really starts. When we start to rely on these exterior elements or even people in life to like validate our experience, then that's where I feel like we start to like lose that connection to ourselves. And it doesn't mean you have to love yourself all the time. We're human beings, we're fallible, we make mistakes. But when we can understand that any other person in our life is just an extension and not a necessity, that we standing alone can be enough, then we have more capacity for those moments of rejection to be like, okay, that was a bummer, but I'm still here. I'm still awesome. They're lost, maybe. And then just leaves more room for other people that I might meet down the road. So I think it's that self-acceptance and that self-love is where it starts.
From my understanding, the work that you do is very hands-on. So when you have a client who has experienced sexual trauma, can you give us an example of what you would help them work through that's different than a therapist, let's say?
Yeah. First, it's the building of the understanding that they are safe in their body, that while they might not feel safe all the time, or maybe even not feel safe in their current state, that they, in fact, being present in front of me are safe. They have their home that they can go to. And when we start with the building of the safety, that's when we can start then allowing for maybe some of the walls, some of the armor that has been put up to start to like melt away and start to strip down. But really it comes down to when we're talking about sexual trauma, again, there's something that happened physically to this individual that is still with them. So if I'm going to be going into any experience where I'm going to be interacting with them in a physical space, it's first them understanding that who I am is not going to be a threat, or that they have choice in everything that we do from that moment when it comes to not just the physical connection, but the emotional connection as well. An example might be, I've worked with a client where we spent the first almost 5 sessions where we were on opposite sides of the room. And only when they felt comfort in moving closer. I recommended that when you feel the desire to move closer, just move a little bit. You don't have to do these big leaps. Just find that place where you feel comfort in coming just a little bit closer. And after 5 sessions, we were able to actually be sitting in front of each other, holding each other's hands. There's varying levels. There might be someone who's had like immense trauma, but might feel very comfortable being held by me in the first session. That's why I go back to the safety of that person in their own body and understanding that whatever trauma that had taken place before in their current present where we are in this moment will not take place again.
And I know you mentioned like the range of trauma is massive. So with your clients, like what kind of range are people coming to you with? And like how do you tailor that? Obviously some of it you just said was around safety, but I'm assuming like someone that has the trauma of maybe not having enough sexual experience and unsure what to do versus someone that's like a domestic abuse or rape survivor is going to be very different. Like, how do you handle that spectrum?
It's a co-creative experience. There's nothing that I can handle alone. And that's why I consider myself more of a guide. We are ultimately responsible for our own healing. So when I'm with someone and we are creating the relationship, because that's what I'm doing with the clients that I'm working with, I'm creating a relationship with them. It's understanding where the current boundaries are, where are the limits. Do you feel okay, like being touched on your shoulder? And before me touching them, asking. I often see like someone might give someone a hug, or they might hold their hand and say, is this okay? For many people that might be completely fine, but some people want to have their voice heard before that action takes place. So it really does vary. It's very dependent on the individual and their comfort level. But ultimately, there is a reason that they came to me, and there's a reason that we're here, and it's to work towards a goal, to work towards an outcome. And that might take years. That might happen in a single session. You just never know. It really depends.
And what does that look like? And excuse my ignorance in this question, but how far do you go with your clients?
I'll say that I will go as far as the client feels comfortable going. And that can be in a very physical, connected, erotic, sensual place. And with that, we make sure that there's very clear understanding of where that comfort level is before we go there. So it's a physical experience. There's plenty of arenas and avenues for talk therapy, and talk therapy I feel is very beneficial for many people. And there's a place that talk therapy cannot go. And that's where myself and other practitioners who feel confident and also comfortable going into physical spaces has that extra added benefit, because with trauma, specifically, we're talking about sexual trauma living in the body, being able to sometimes go back into that trauma, being able to maybe even relive that, but knowing that now you have a voice to say no. Now you have a voice and agency to reclaim what was maybe taken from you.
So when you say physical, like, could we go anywhere from like recreating that middle school dance to like full on like recreating a sexual experience? Like, what are the limits and lines of what physical means?
Yes, it could be, like you said, recreating that dance where you get to hear yes, or you get to hear no and be told more than just no. It's no, and I really appreciate you asking. Maybe we could try another time.
Like, has it been like ever like full on sex, or is that like a line? Is there a line?
There's always a line. And for me, in the work that I do with my clients, every situation is unique. Knowing that what takes place between us in our sessions also stays confidential is also vitally important to that individual feeling safe to fully allow themselves to let go and surrender into their healing process.
Got it.
Wow. I'm so blown away. My body's just having a reaction to all of this, because my question back to you, Andre, is how do you do the work that you do, and it's so physical, hands-on, and not absorb other people's trauma into your body? I feel like
Yeah.
that's where my body's being pulled right now.
I think this is where I feel that I'm uniquely set up to do this work because I've experienced my own sexual trauma, because I've also experienced my own other varying forms of trauma, PTSD from being deployed in a war zone and my own life upbringings, that I have done a lot of really deep and challenging work, not only for myself, but for the individuals that come to me, to be able to know that they're held in a way that maybe not everyone can. I mean, I'm 5'10", and the chances of me like being a pro basketball player are very slim, but there are people that are designed for that work.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it's the same for this work as well.
Mm.
And it really also comes down to how I take care of myself, making sure that I'm showing up with integrity, making sure that I'm have my own rituals of, you mentioned like that trauma not like holding on to me, like decording rituals,
Mm.
so that once I've worked with someone, I'm not carrying that
Yeah.
back home to my partner, to lovers, to clients I'm going to be working with in the future. And there's no exact science to it all. And there's definitely times where I'm working with someone and that particular experience was a lot more challenging, than previous. And allowing myself that human experience of the emotionality that took place. So it can be a challenging thing to navigate, and I can do it. And it's something that I've been able to do for many years. And I just feel fortunate and grateful that people feel safe enough and trust me to take them into these spaces.
I think this whole concept, I've had a couple conversations with friends, ironically, about this topic in the last week. So it's interesting that we're now talking to you about this. And we were talking about how, like, sometimes trauma can show up that's not even sexual. Like, it could be something like losing a parent or, anything that has nothing to do with sexuality, but it does somehow play into sexual experiences later on.
Mm.
How have you seen like other traumas that aren't like the sexual ones, whether that's, the big T sexual traumas or even the small T ones that we were discussing, but just like completely left field traumas of nothing to do with sex? How do you see those still impacting sex?
Yeah, I mean, what we see in the way that we're raised, what we learn in our upbringing carries on. So if we are a product of divorce, I'm a product of divorce,
Mm-hmm.
then that there might have some implication on how I create relationship down the road.
Mm.
And I was married and then got divorced. So there's a very good chance that what I witnessed from my parents contributed to what happened in my relationship with my ex-wife, and then so on and so forth. So it doesn't have to be from a physical, sexual like place of it being like this big T trauma. It could be if you don't go out with your makeup on,
Mm.
wearing your nicest clothing, then you're not going to land a man. And if you don't land a man, then you're going to be alone for the rest
Mm.
of your life. I mean, that can carry on for
Yeah.
forever if not approached or talked about. And that has nothing to do with an actual physical experience. That's all around like the psychological of, am I good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Am I someone that is pretty enough? Am I someone worthy enough of partnership, or am I going to be destined to be alone for the rest of my life? I mean, that falls under a small T, but to me that's pretty big.
You also mentioned PTSD earlier, and very curious to know, how does PTSD show up as a sexual trauma? And what do you do with your clients to help them work through that?
Well, I mean, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, when talked about, generally we think about or we go to something having to do with like the military or war or a traffic accident that left us like with certain like actual physical injuries as well, but that emotional injury continues on. Anything that is traumatic and has caused a stress like point in your body to continue on post the experience is PTSD. So when we're talking about sexual trauma, it might be that you were assaulted and had someone hands around your throat and you were like losing your capability to breathe, and you were, fortunately able to get past the physical point, but the trauma piece still lives on. So now if anyone touches your neck, even if in the most gentle, caring way, might re-trigger that trauma experience from previous. So for instance, if that were the case and I was to work with someone and that might be something they want to understand more or work through, it might be slowly moving through that rather than me putting my hand near their neck or on their throat, them having the capability to take my hand and again, moving slowly. There's no rush to any of this. It's really the comfort level to each person. But knowing that here they feel safe. They don't feel in any danger. They feel like they have control over their emotions, over their physical body. And it might take another session or two until the hands moved here and then feeling safe there, and so on and so forth. So it's finding where that trigger point is, recognizing it, which can be challenging, especially I'll say for me as a practitioner, it's sometimes challenging when that trigger point comes back. Because in a way, I am now stepping in as the perpetrator, and that can be a lot to take on. And again, I feel uniquely qualified to be able to do this.
So we had a listener write in and share that she's recently connected the dots between her PTSD and her groinal response, or basically like her desire levels, and, you know, sometimes wanting sex often and other times not so much. And she said she worked with a therapist to make the connection. So how do you start? I mean, obviously working with a therapist is one path forward, but I'm like, how do you actually make that connection for things that were outside of like a sexual realm, that this could actually be impacting your sex life and intimacy with partners?
Well, first, again, seeking outside resources. If for some reason, and it's completely okay that it's not something you're able to fully comprehend or solve on your own, and whether it be through research on like the internet or reading a book, that you're wanting outside experience and help, going to a therapist, talking about it, like being able to feel comfortable sharing that there is something in your life that is currently not where you want it to be, and you want to shift into a different place than where you are. So having that conversation, and then in that conversation, again, sometimes going backwards. Oftentimes when I work with clients, I like to go back to, again, childhood, because we all started at some point as our younger versions of ourselves. And somewhere along the way, we went from a place of feeling safe or feeling held or feeling loved. And then something happened. There is a moment, and it could be many moments, but there is a pivotal moment where that experience happened that altered the way that we see relationship, the way that we see sex, the way that we feel safe during physical intimate experiences. And then when we pinpoint that, now we know where that trigger point is. It's through very slow, guided, again, consent negotiation, going to that point and actually spending time there. It might take some time. It might take months before you feel comfortable even talking about a specific part of your body that was violated. It might even take longer for you to then want to show someone, whether it be a partner or a practitioner, where that took place. And then even further, when you feel comfort in being able to go to that place physically with someone, knowing again that you're safe in that experience or safer in that experience, you can now reclaim maybe that loss of power that you felt.
Can you also just go a little deeper on what groinal response means? Because when we had this person write in and I saw the two words, I was like, oh, that's what I was experiencing after my last relationship ended due to infidelity. For those first 2 months, every time I thought about him with these other women, I was like, turned on.
Interesting.
Like I had a groinal response to that visual, and I didn't understand why I was getting sexual pleasure from something that was making me so angry. So I would love to learn a little bit more about that.
This is also very much like person and situation dependent, But the groinal response you're talking about is maybe one from a state of turn on. The groinal response might be a state of like tension, of holding of what was that trauma experience. So for instance, vaginismus is where there's like the tightening of the vaginal muscles, where even like the smallest pinky of even themselves, self-pleasuring might not actually be able to enter because there's something that took place that they don't feel safe in their body to be able to allow that muscle, that pelvic floor area to relax into. So when we're talking about your experience where you were receiving turn on from this is where that taking power back can happen. Sometimes this is done where when we're able to be in that experience that at first was traumatic and say, but here is me saying, I get to control the outcome of this. And that actually is a turn on. You're now, again, getting to reclaim it as your own. When you said groinal response, I'm happy to hear how you described it, because where I went initially was the response of like restriction, of closing, of holding.
I think you bring up another point too, Yue, that doesn't need to be stuff from your like formative years. It very much could be, but this is like a continuous piece. And I mean, I feel like when someone experiences a trauma like being cheated on, you could not want to have any sexual relations either. It's kind of like the reverse of the clamming up piece. I mean, we've touched on some examples, but like, is there anything we're missing in terms of where this trauma can stem from, or like how wide it ranges?
I mean, I feel like we've hit a lot of really substantial points, and it doesn't even have to happen to you. That's the other thing.
Oh, interesting.
You can hear about an experience that someone else had, and that might put you into a fear state of, for instance, like say you love traveling and then you found out one of your friends was traveling and they were assaulted, and that now they have fear of ever leaving their home. If that had such an impact on you where you are no longer traveling because you don't want that to happen to you, that's now a trauma response. And that didn't even physically happen to you in your experience. So if there's anything that I would hope that people take away from listening to this, is that you have so much room and possibility for healing within your trauma experience, and to allow yourself patience and grace that if it doesn't happen overnight, that you're not broken, that you still have time to work through these experiences, and you don't have to do it alone. That's where therapists, practitioners come in, because we all need help. You ladies, I'm sure, have needed help at some point in your life as well. So allowing yourself the grace and compassion that there's healing in your future. It's just a matter of when you feel ready. No one can force you to do that. And that's sometimes the challenging piece, is the self-responsibility of wanting to go into that healing journey, because no one's going to be able to push us into that. We need to do it on our own.
Let's hold that thought for a quick message.
This episode is sponsored by Honeylove. The holidays are here, and it's the perfect excuse to treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear from Honeylove. Honeylove has revolutionized the bra and shapewear game, so you no longer have to sit through uncomfortable holiday work events in uncomfortable shapewear. Because isn't making small talk with your manager enough torture? My go-to Honeylove product is the best-selling Superpower Short. It has targeted compression technology that distinguishes between areas where you want more support and areas you need less compression. Their Signature X targets and sculpts your midsection without squeezing your natural curves. Honeylove is just as easy to put on as it is to take off. Shapewear shouldn't be hard. Their products make you look good and feel good. Treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save up to 20% off site-wide at honeylove.com/dateable this month only. Inventory is limited and the sale ends soon, so don't miss their best deals of the year. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. It's time to ditch the underwire for good, thanks to Honeylove. It's all about taking back the control and being empowered. Sometimes I think in sex, we feel like we're giving up the control to the other person. Like we're just following along and just going along for the ride. And this work that you do goes beyond sexual trauma. I think it's just overall how we look at sex as a society is problematic, that we don't think we have the power sometimes. When you think about communities like BDSM and kink communities, do you think that those are good ways to kind of open up our views on sex? And, if someone's not ready for one-on-one work with you, do you think that's a good entry point?
Short answer is yes, I do. And with anything, it's important that we do our due diligence, that we do our research, that we ask ourselves the question of why are we going into these spaces? What do we want to experience? Making sure we're having very clear, guided, consensual conversations with individuals that we might be going into these spaces with. But the realm of BDSM, it's one that I feel very comfortable in, that I enjoy in my personal life, but I also will go in with clients as well. And when we get to relive or be in that experience that might have been traumatic, but now from a place of taking that control back and having that power, being empowered, we have now been able to reclaim it. And that's where BDSM is a great space. So this is just a quick example. You might have immense trauma from being spanked with a hanger when you were younger. And now, anytime you see a hanger or anytime anyone might touch your butt, that might re-trigger what that experience was. But when you can allow yourself the room to, in a safe way, be with someone and now have them, through negotiation, through clear guidelines, bring in a hanger or bring in spanking. And now you see that there's something here that you're able to relive, but now it's no longer from a place of you not having choice. You have choice. You're asking, yeah, I want you to spank my ass. Now you've been able to, again, reclaim that power. So kink BDSM is a really beautiful space to dip your toe into this. And I also want to be very clear that it's a very large and nebulous space, and making sure you're going to people who have the requisite knowledge, the experience, making sure you're asking the right questions, go with a friend to a munch, which is basically like a kink meetup, go to a dungeon or a party where you have outlets where you know that if you want to leave at any time, you can. And if you want to stay and just watch or ask questions, you have that space too. I would say in the open relationship community, as well as the BDSM community, these are some of the most well-intentioned communities when it comes to like communication, consent.
Yeah.
Because you have to be, because if you're not, you will be kicked out in 2 seconds. I can't say I see that all the time in other forms of connection, even, we talk about more traditional relationship dynamics. So yes, that's the longer answer.
I mean, I totally see the logic of that, because repressing things doesn't help. So it's like, how do you reframe it with this? My question for you, though, is there ever a case it goes too far and it compounds the trauma instead of fixing it?
Yes. And that's why I say it's really important that you are with knowledgeable individuals, people who have experience, people who have not just researched this, but actually lived it. I will not go into a space, or I will not provide a certain experience to someone that I have not at least tested on myself or with someone else that I feel safe and comfortable going into that with. There are people that have come to me that have wanted to experience elements that are outside of my knowledge base. And I will admit that. And it's okay to admit that you don't know everything, that you don't also feel comfortable. A lot of this is around also boundaries. I know we've probably only said it a couple of times, but realizing your own boundaries is very essential to your healing journey. You can definitely re-trigger trauma points and make things worse if it's not being held in a safe and consensual way. So that's why I will reiterate to make sure that you are asking the right questions. And then if you have even more questions, don't feel like you have to rush into anything. Like, you have time as well to learn.
I know that our conversation's making some people blush, for sure, because they probably never openly talked about any of this. And even if you take a step back, I think there's just a lot of shame around sex in general.
Oh, yeah.
I was out with a girlfriend the other night and we're talking about this new guy. She's like, oh, everything's so great. We've been on some great dates and we had sex. And she like whispered and I was like, what? And she's like, and then we had sex. And I'm like, why are you whispering? Why is this a secret? She's like, I don't know. I'm like not comfortable talking about it yet. And I didn't understand why. So what are some ways if people still feel a lot of shame around sex and talking about sex and even the act of sex, what are some baby steps that people can take to start removing those barriers?
Yeah. I think the first baby step is realizing that we are all sexual beings.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the way, we were shamed for our desires. We were told that having certain wants or turn-ons were wrong or sinful, or loving a certain gender that might not be societal norm was like blasphemy. And also, we are people that are educated through the years, and when we're not receiving certain education in certain facets, we're not going to have the requisite knowledge to be able to fully understand that particular subject matter. I don't know what it was like for you both, but I think my sex education was maybe like a 2-hour video of here's Tim and here's Betty, and they really like each other, and
then don't get pregnant.
But they should probably wait until marriage. Yeah, that's what we're taught.
Yeah.
We're not taught that we're deserving of pleasure. We're not taught that emotions and connection in sex is just as important as the overall goal, societal goal of like getting pregnant and then having a baby and then the white picket fence. So it makes sense that your friend and other people don't sit around a dinner table and talk about orgasms or talk about some really raunchy sex. It feels comfortable. Like my dream, because this is what I do, and sometimes, it makes people uncomfortable. And when I find out that it does, I know that I can then tailor what I'm talking about. But I speak about sex as if it's just another day. And when we can start to like do that as a collective and make it not this shameful thing or this thing that we only talk about with friends or this thing that we only do in the privacy of our own bedroom, will diminish some of the feelings of shame. If you want to like really see how human beings can just be their full, free, uninhibited selves, go to a play party. One that, again, where people have clear guidelines of what is safe and consensual, but see what it's like to be in a room of a bunch of people having intimate experiences. And here's some people having sex over here while two people are having a drink at a bar and the other two are watching TV because that's what they're choosing to do at the party. It really comes down to us realizing that we have our inherent right of being sexual beings and celebrating it, celebrating each other for being that way.
We did an episode where we went to a play party. So we are 100% with you, just being in that environment, seeing it. Even if you're not ready to participate, I think just being exposed to it is mind-opening. Let's say, though, you're a little bit more vanilla and you're not ready to make the venture to the sex party. How do you start to like open up a conversation with your partner in a way that like removes the shame and lets people openly talk about their traumas? Again, big T to the smallest of T's, whatever that might entail. How do you start having a conversation that feels more like opening up about the topic?
Yeah, if you're open to it, Julie, maybe you and I could do a quick little like role play.
Yes.
A little
Let's
role
do
play
it.
in this, if you're open to it.
Okay.
I love watching.
So yeah, do it. I got your consent. Okay, so Julie, we've been dating for a year now, and I've absolutely loved all of the intimate connection that we've been sharing. There's been something that I've been wanting to share with you, but I've been nervous. And I feel like I can trust you to hold me in this and know that I love you and I care about you. And if you have any questions, I'm here for it. But would you be open to hearing about this fantasy that I have?
I would love to hear, Andre. I'm here for you.
Thank you. I have this fantasy of watching you and another man have a really delicious sexual experience where I'm not involved. And I'm wondering how that makes you feel hearing me say that.
No, I'm a little turned on right now. I'm not I'm not
Me
sure like
too.
how I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I admit that's not something I've done before or thought about doing. Would it be okay if we talked about this more and what that might entail for, each of our sexuality and our relationship?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you receiving it. And I want you to know that if there's anything that you ever want to share with me that maybe you have thought about and were hesitant, that I'm here to hold that for you. And we'll just take it slow. And there's no rush to any of this.
Love that. Thank you for sharing.
So that was an example, like conversation of when you can trust that your partner will love you and hold you no matter what comes out of your mouth,
Yeah.
that these are just ideas, that these are just feelings, that it's nothing personal. We're not saying, oh, you sitting across from me are not enough for me and I'm just trying to like find my way out. You're enough for me and there's more that I'm desiring and I want to figure out what that is. And we might not actually ever physically go into that.
Yeah.
But we can at least talk about it. And now it's out there. That's why I say, like in BDSM and open relating, that these particular groups of dynamics are so powerful because the authenticity in the communication is just overwhelmingly just amazing. Sometimes it's challenging. You might hear something that is hard to hear, but when you can say something and now you've said it and it's the truth and you're not holding back, the weight of that off of you is just, you can't compare it.
I was going to say, like, obviously this wasn't a role play scenario, but I'm like thinking about if this actually was a scenario, I probably would have maybe asked more, like, is this a request or is this just something you're sharing with me? Like, how do you break down that piece? Because I think sometimes when people tell you something, your mind automatically goes to like, they want to do this tomorrow, where that might not even be the case.
Well, right there. I mean, that was a perfect example, is asking that question.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so you shared that with me. Thank you. Is this like an idea? Is this something you want to put into action?
Yeah.
And now it's up to me to then go deeper into that. And then we have dialogue. But I think what sometimes happens is we don't always assume positive intent when we have conversations like this. And doing so, that's why we get hurt. And then when we're hurt, then we're like, okay, I don't want to share this ever again. Or if I do, I'm going to hold back a bit. It's being able to feel confident that whatever does get shared, even if it's challenging, that we can work through it together. And it takes practice. Like none of this is like overnight.
Yeah.
Again, I've been in my relationship for 10 years. We've been open in our relationship since we met, since the inception.
Wow.
And we are currently moving through a very challenging time in our relationship. Very challenging. This isn't like a fix, oh, I did this once and now we're good. And it happens in monogamous relationships as well. It's where do you, again, just feel confident in the relationship that what you share will at least be heard. It doesn't have to be fully understood, but it will at least be heard. And then you guys can move through it slowly with practice over time.
Can I ask you for one more role play? And you could do it with Yue this time.
Yue, would you be open to that?
I'm very open.
Okay. I'm just like thinking of the range that we have here. And this is something we get a lot as a question, especially from men, I think, of men that don't have a lot of sexual experience, whether it was like some past trauma, big T or little t, depending on where it came from. How do they share that with their partner or potential new partner in a way that they'll still feel like the person's attracted to them, but, share their truth? And then also, if they don't have as much of experience, the partner's not like, why is this person terrible in bed? That's more like, again, what the perception is that we've heard people say before.
Okay. And what is this in the role play?
Let's say you're the person with inexperience and Yue is the person you're trying to date. Like, how are you going to share this truth with her in a way that, keeps your relationship moving forward, but you're sharing your truth?
This is a good example right here, also for your listeners. I checked in with UA where Julie brought in an idea. She was excited about it. She's like, hey, I'd like you to do this with UA.
Yeah.
I could have been like, yeah, I'm in. Let's do this. But instead, I took a moment and I checked in and I asked her if she was open to it.
Yeah.
And she said yes. It wasn't a okay or I'm not sure. There is clear consent in that agreement. So just don't want to gloss over that. That's important that we always check in with someone to make sure that they're on board. Even if someone else says, I'm good, they'll come along with me. Check in with that person. So yeah, I realized the last time that we were in bed together that I came really quickly. I was really turned on and it was a powerful orgasm. And I realized that it didn't last very long. And I have some shame around that, but I want to talk with you about this because I feel like you can help me to calm myself down earlier on. And if you're open to hearing this, I feel very safe sharing it with you, but I just wanted to check in to see if you're open to receiving some feedback.
Thank you for sharing that with me, Andre. To be honest, I didn't even think about that as a factor. I was very happy that you came. That makes me happy. I hope that we can move towards a relationship where it's not about timing of orgasms and judging the timing, but that we are both equally happy and feel pleasured in our sexual experience. So maybe that's something we can work towards.
I love you even more than I did before.
I love you too.
What my feedback is, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So when you were going down on me, I realized how much more sensitive I am on like the head of my member than I used to be. And you were going really fast. And that got me just to a point of like my explosive moment. So maybe in the future, we can try maybe moving slower. And that would allow me more time to settle into feeling your mouth on me and allowing me to last a little bit longer.
I so appreciate that feedback because I've only watched porn all my life and that's what they do. They go fast and nobody's given me that feedback before. So I'm glad that you're telling me what is pleasurable to you because I don't have a penis. I wouldn't know what would make it feel good. And it's on you to tell me that. So I appreciate that.
I love this.
That was great.
That was great. And I think like
I'm giving all three of us a round of applause on that one.
I think for our listeners too, like if you're not as eloquent as maybe I will say Andre and UA were from listening, that's okay too. I think we don't need to be buttoned up to have this conversation. Yes. What I like about it though is it's just opening things up in a way that's transparent, it's sharing, it's hopefully bringing you closer to your partner.
Yes. Well said, Julia.
Well, this has been such an incredible conversation. I mean, there's so many takeaways. I don't even know where to start. But I think the biggest one I have is just like recognizing our human experiences, not putting shame on the past, but also not feeling like the past defines us too. So what are ways that we can leverage what may have happened? I'm hoping that like this is triggering just a lot for people, not in the sense that there's something wrong with you if you have like past trauma, but more of just accepting that that's part of the human experience, that we all have our traumas and past cuts and wounds that impact the way we date and are intimate today and have sex and all the ways it shows up. So just giving yourself grace, like it sounds so cheesy, but this like loving your inner child bit, like I think there is something there of just like going back to that time, whether you go to the full extreme of working with someone like Andre to like recreate that middle school dance, or even just telling yourself like, okay, that was middle school, like that was an unfortunate situation that happened, but look how far I've come today. So I think there's many ways you can navigate it. Of course, a lot of it depends on your own self and what's going on for you, but just knowing that there are resources if you feel like you need that outside person, I think that would make me feel a lot better, just knowing there is someone I can turn to. And again, it's up to you of like what works for you. And maybe it's trial and error. maybe it's trying talk therapy. And if that doesn't work, trying something more hands-on. Like there's many ways to go through it. But I loved what you said, Andre, of like, if this is still something that's getting in the way of you having the intimacy and love life you want, then it's worth double clicking on and looking a little deeper of what might be going on.
Yes, well said.
Yeah, I mean, Andre, honestly, before even talking to you, I had no idea this is what people can do. I had no idea you could be this resource for someone. And I wish I had you when I was going through my breakup and just being disgusted by men, not wanting anybody to touch me, and really going through this period of repulsion. From this conversation, it feels like sex can be expanded with the right resources and help and support and also mindset. And we can take back control of our previous experiences and then have more agency of our sexual desire moving forward. So with previous experiences, we can say, yes, that happened to me, but I can take back how it's manifesting in my body. So that's taking control. And then being able to say, I have agency over my body and my desire, and I can communicate that with my partner, with the people I am sexually involved with myself. Sometimes I've masturbated. I'm like, does this even feel good? Am I like giving myself feedback? Like, are you just doing this because you've seen it somewhere, or are you doing it for your own pleasure? It's hard for me to disconnect the two, but I'm glad we're having this conversation because we can take agency over our own sexual desire. So with that, if people want to know more about your work and more about you, where can they find you?
You can find me on my website, which is coming-closer.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, and that's Coming Closer with Andre.
Awesome. And we'll link everything in the show notes as well.
Beautiful. And to something you said, Yue, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients where they have said, I'm so glad that you exist in the world, and I had no idea that you existed in the world. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there just like myself doing this work. So know that if there's something that you're wanting to go deeper into your healing journey, that there's a likelihood that that person or that modality exists. So just doing some research and you'll find what you're looking for.
Well, thank you so much, Andre, for being here. This was such a great conversation. We're really glad that you were able to join us.
Thank you both.
Yeah, really appreciate you and appreciate our listeners who've come along for the ride, coming closer and coming along for the ride, who maybe came already. But for those of you who are still with us, you know, this is a great time to go to Apple Podcasts, give us a rating and review, 5 stars, and maybe in the body of the review, you can tell us, what did you learn from this episode? What did you learn from Andre? What did you learn about yourself? We really appreciate those love letters as well. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. Stay Dateable. The Dateable podcast is part of the Frolic Media Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Dateable Podcast and visit dateablepodcast.com for access to all the episodes and our premium programs. Also, make sure to subscribe today if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform, so you are the first to get all the latest episodes. And most importantly, stay dateable.